Okay, so good evening, everyone. I'm going to be taking you through some of the pharmaceutical, the pharmaceutical dosage forms. Yeah, is that? Oh, okay. So I'm going to start with the oral dosage forms. So basically, oral dosage forms are mostly liquid preparations in which the API has been dissolved in a liquid vehicle, which is now used as the delivery system for the medication. Yeah. So the pharmaceutical solutions are like in different forms. There could be syrups, there could be elixirs, there could be tincture. No, tinctures are they? No, hold on. Sorry. Suspensions, yes. So there's so many different like excipients that could be used in the preparation of these vehicles and these dosage forms. So the vehicle is usually purified water, and then you can add co-solvents like propylene glycol, glycerin, or alcohol. And these co-solvents, as we mentioned before, could be for APIs that are non-soluble in water, since water is the main vehicle. So if it's not, yeah, so if it's insoluble in water, you can, and it's soluble in propylene glycol is soluble in water. So you first dissolve it in the propylene glycol, and then afterwards you dissolve it in the, then afterwards you can now add it to the purified water. Or you can first do it in the alcohol, in the glycerin, and so on and so forth. Then there's so many other agents that would also help to enhance the solubility. If like we mentioned this before as well with chai in the previous discussion. And then you can use surface active agents. So if they lower the surface tension of water, it would enhance the wetting property if it's a solid API, and also enhance the solubility, the overall solubility of the API or the solid therapeutic agent in the vehicle, which is the water. Then you have preservatives. Preservatives are usually substances that inhibit bacterial growth in one way or another. So because you are dissolving your therapeutic agent in water, and water provides a good growth, um, water provides life essentially. So if it supports the growth of bacteria, you want to prevent the growth of bacteria in your oral solution, your oral preparation. So that's why we add preservatives. And examples of most the common examples of preservatives are benzoic acid or any salt of benzoic acid. In this case, they've highlighted like para-hydroxybenzoate esters or propyl. This one, the propyl hydroxybenzoate, and sorbic acid or any sorbate salts. Those are the most common ones that we came across in practice. These two. So addition of sweeteners, these sweeteners can be either glucose, liquid glucose specifically, saccharin, aspartame, and these are mostly, they just enhance the sweetness of the mixture so that you can mask any bitter or unpleasant taste that could arise from the actual therapeutic agent. So you can now administer it orally. And then it enhances compliance. And then the others are the viscosity modifiers. So I think we've seen a good number of them. Cellulose derivatives are the most common ones that we've come across, that are mostly like mentioned or used in practice. They could enhance, like increase the viscosity, that it's easier to enhance the viscosity of your preparations, that it's easier one to administer, like to put in your, to easily measure, like using a syringe, mostly for administering to children. They can come with those syringes. So for droppers, so is that to measure the accuracy of the dose that you're giving. And also it should, you have to optimize your viscosity, because if it's too viscous or it's too thick, it will be difficult to remove or to pour from whatever, like the bottle or whatever that you're using, your container that you're using to store the dosage form. Yes, so others include antioxidants. So if your what's it called? If the therapeutic agent can easily be degraded, denatured, or its therapeutic potential can easily be lowered by any oxidation. So you add an antioxidant so that you maintain the stability of the dosage form, the physical and chemical stability of the dosage form. Then you can add things like colors and flavoring agents and excuse me, colors and flavoring agents. These ones are mostly just for aesthetics. Like after you can make different flavors in the same drug, just so you can attracts the different consumers, especially in like kids' preparations. The colors tend to draw them in. And then buffers, which are just help to regulate the pH and keep a nearly constant pH in your entire formulation. And then the most common examples are the citrate buffers. So these excipients, as we've mentioned, them are common to nearly all any what's it called again? Oral solutions for oral administration. You find them in elixirs, in tinctures, in suspensions, in syrups. So just you can general overview, even if you don't really go in depth to read from one dosage form to the next, you can just keep this in mind as you can apply them when necessary, depending on the version that you find. So the advantages of giving solutions for oral dosage is that they can easily be administered to people like the geriatrics or pediatrics because they may have difficulty in swallowing. The therapeutic agent is easily dissolved. Like it helps you. There's faster absorption and faster drug delivery to site of action, like where you need it to go, because you've already ruled out the middleman of having to disintegrate and then dissolve because by administering it in a liquid form. And then you can mask the bitter or unpleasant tastes by use of the sweetness that we mentioned, as well as adding flavors. And then the disadvantages is if a therapeutic agent is chemically unstable in presence of water, remember water is the main solvent for these dosage forms, then you cannot use it. You cannot administer drug as an oral dosage form. And then if there is poor solubility of agents in pharmaceutical solution, then unless you find a way of enhancing the solubility by using solubility modifiers or maybe using co-solvents or surface active agents, if you're unable to make the drug any more soluble by use of the known methods that I've mentioned before, then now you cannot administer it as a liquid dosage form. And then because they are liquids, they are bulky and then also difficult and expensive to shape. So you may have noticed like if a drug is given as just a powder and then you're just told to go home and just dissolve it in water, that bottle is much lighter than you would if it's already in a liquid form. Yeah. So I think that's basically it for like solutions, pharmaceutical solutions. And then I'm going to quickly take you through suspensions. Yeah, so here it just gives like a more in-depth review of these excipients that I mentioned before. For example, the buffers, the main role, again, as I said before, just to recap really quickly before I move on to something else, is they maintain the solubility of the therapeutic agent because some drugs are only soluble at a particular pH, and any alteration in pH could result in either forming of like crystal formation or they become insoluble, and as such they what's this thing called? They lose their it lowers their therapeutic potential, or just it may form an entirely different product than what you intended. So in order to maintain your pH, you need a buffer. Then they also enhance stability, as I mentioned before, and the common examples are acetates, citrates, and phosphates. So either the acetic acid or its salts, and those are the percentages within which you should keep your buffers that you are putting in your solution. And then sweetening agents, the main ones employed are sucrose, liquid glucose, as I mentioned, glycerol, sorbitol, saccharin, sodium, and aspartame. Yeah. Then this is mostly so the use of a caution is that we tend to regulate the use of sugars in preparation of diabetic medication. So you have to find like you have to either avoid them or put them in really low concentrations or just find alternatives to use of sweetening agents. Yeah. And then now we have the viscosity enhancing agents. So like I said before, you have to ensure that the viscosity is controlled in order to make sure that there's accuracy in measurement of the dosage form for the volume to be dispensed. Yeah. And then examples of, so there are two types of viscosity of viscosity modifiers, there's the ionic and non-ionic. So the non-ionic, which are the neutral polymers, are mostly cellulose derivatives like methyl cellulose, hydroxyethyl cellulose, and so on and so forth. And then the ionic ones, which are the charged molecules, are sodium carboxy methyl cellulose, which is anionic, meaning it's negatively charged, or sodium agglunate, which is also anionic. Yeah. So antioxidants, as I mentioned before, they enhance the stability of the therapeutic agents, which may be susceptible to degradation by oxidation. Yeah. So the examples of antioxidants that are commonly used in aqueous preparation specifically include sodium sulfite, sodium metabisulfite, sodium formaldehyde, and ascorbic acid. And then examples that are used in oil-based solutions are BHT and BHA, like the butylated hydroxytoluene or butylated hydroxyannulose and propyl gallate. So and just keep those in mind. There are different ones used for aqueous formulations and those used for oil-based formulations. So oil-based, BHT, BHA, those ones. And then the aqueous ones are the sulfites, the sodium sulfite or the metabisulfite, yeah. So again, preservatives, like I said, an ideal preservative should have antibiotic properties because we're trying to preserve the drug from prevent the drug from having any microbial growth, because now this means that it's contaminated, you cannot administer it. The microbes themselves uh, could metabolize the drug. So we don't want them to be in our preparation. So you administer a preservative, which ideally should be a broad spectrum antibiotic, meaning it should have activity against both gram-positive and gram-negative bacteria and fungi. And it should be chemically stable throughout the shelf life of the product, and it should have a low toxicity. So the common ones that are used are benzoic acid and its salts like sodium benzoate, and it should be in those percentages 0.1 to 0.3 of the overall solution, the bulk of the solution that you're going to make. And then the sorbic acid with its potassium sorbate, which is among its salts, you must keep it between 0.05, 0.2. And then alkyl esters of para-hydroxy benzoic acid. Now this one is it's much more rare to use this one, paraben. Most people are phasing out paraben in use of their preparations, and so benzoic acid and sorbic acid, as well as air salts, are the most common preservatives that are being used on the market. Yeah. So let me see. That is, yeah. So now I'm going to take you through like the common. I think we know most. We might have taken you through. You can probably piece together what goes on for like syrups, but then there are some specific liquid dosage forms such as suspensions that are called dispersed systems, and they have a few like different properties from their like other counterparts. So pharmaceutical suspensions can also be referred to as dispersed systems. And the reason they're called dispersed system is because the therapeutic agent is dispersed in an external phase, which is the vehicle. And I mentioned before, it's mostly water. So you disperse your therapeutic agent if in solid dosage form or whatever which is a solid, and you disperse it in your liquid vehicle, which vehicle is actually supposed to carry the drug because you cannot administer it on its own for whatever reason that you can either it has um unpleasant taste or smell, so you need to mask it within the vehicle. Yeah. So now the characteristics of an acceptable suspension is that it should have, ideally what we would want it to be, that it should have a low rate of sedimentation. It should be easily redispersed, even if you just shake a little, it should easily redisperse. It should sediment slowly. That it should have good geological properties to enable the formulation to easily be removed from the container. And then it should be aesthetically pleasing, because if it looks funny or it doesn't look as it was advertised, the patient or whoever is administering may suspect that the drug has maybe gone bad or it wasn't well made, and then Meanwhile, it just doesn't look nice, but it still works effectively. So the advantage of suspensions are similar to advantages of the other general advantages of oral dosage forms. Specifically, so I'd just like to draw your attention more to the disadvantages, which are more specific to suspensions on their own. So the pharmaceutical suspensions are fundamentally unstable, unfortunately. So because you have to strike a balance between them redispersing quickly, and they have to sediment slowly, and you're trying to prevent caking. Caking is when they form like a thick layer at the bottom, like they settle and then they form a cake layer at the bottom. So that even if you shake, no matter how much you shake, they will not redisperse, which is something that you do not want to do. So because of this instability, they require a lot of skill and information to be able to find um, the right way to formulate your suspension and for this stability to be retained for the entire shelf life of the drug. And then it's difficult to make aesthetic suspensions. Like I said, if they change in appearance in any way, it could lead to loss of trust by the consumers because they may assume that the drug no longer works or it wasn't well made or it's a duplicate or something when it just doesn't look aesthetic. And then because the liquid preparations, they tend to be bulky and more difficult for a patient to carry around. So there are two like phenomenon that are like unique or specific to suspensions as oral preparations. So there is the electrical properties of the dispersed particles, meaning there could be charged molecules. The therapeutic agent could have charged organic groups such as like the carboxyl group, which would easily lose the hydrogen to form the COO negative, so meaning it has formed anions. And then there's also the hydrogens are dispersed the cations, so it forms like charged molecules. Or it could be the effect of the distance and separation between particles and their subsequent interaction. Yeah, so the presence of charge of electrical properties could be due to two of the following. So it could either you have ionizable functional groups such as the carboxyl or the nitro or the ammonia groups, which could form charge when in aqueous solution, or it could be as a result of adsorption of ions on the surface of the particle. So this first one is I find it to be self-explanatory. So I'll just move on to the adsorption part because that one seems to be a bit more complex in its way. So in this regard, so now we have adsorption of ions on the surface of the particle. So so it could either be that cations are adsorbed onto the surface of the molecule, or it could be anions that are adsorbed onto the surface. It depends. But then the adsorption of these cations on the surface of the particle creates or generates a potential, and this is referred to as the enhanced potential. So this potential is as a result of cations or ions basically adsorbing onto the surface of the particle. And then these ions are responsible for, and then these ions are the potential determining ions. The potential determining ions are to determine what the enhanced potential will be. So anions, which are then electrostatically attracted to the positive surface of the particle, when they now adsorb onto the surface, they repel because like repels like, and they will repel any other anions from trying to adsorb themselves onto the now positively charged particle because of the positive cations that had already adsorbed onto it. So like just to give like a brief illustration of what I'm talking about. So remember this is your suspension, yeah? So it has been dispersed into this, it's in this pot, it has been dispersed. So this is one of the particles of your suspension. So it can be, so your particle can be neutral, but then if your vehicle contains the what's that thing called? Positive charges, the cations that we talked about here, those positive charges, those positive charge particles will adhere or will absorb themselves onto this particle that we're talking about. And then with time, because like repels like, they will repel any other any cations from adhering onto the surface. However, they will attract negatively charged particles onto the surface. So the negative will be attracted like this, in this manner. So it will form, so this is like a diagram. Okay, this is what I understood, the diagrammatic representation of this whole thing. So the positive charge, the positive ones are there and form like a layer on top of the particles. And then if there's any negative ions in the solution, they now come and are attracted to the now positive surface, and then they are there to form an electric double layer, as I've mentioned here. And this electric double layer is the Stern plane. This. Now the overall resultant, whatever of this is now, oh, that's the Stern plane. Yeah. So now the potential determining ions are the ones which are on the surface of the particle. So meaning these cations, these positively charged ions are now the potential determining ions, and then the ones are responsible for the enhanced potential. Has anyone gotten lost from that point?
Comfort, could you please repeat? I'm lost.
Okay, no one has responded, so I'll just carry on. I'll assume silence means you've all understood. So,
Comfort.
So now this Stern plane, as we've mentioned, just to give a brief recap of what I've explained, the adsorbed ions on the surface of the particle. This is your particle. This is the cations and all the adsorbed ions on the surface of the particle. And the second one, so we've checked that one off the list. And then we have the adsorbed counter ions. Remember, the counter ions are the oppositely charged ions, yeah? The counter ions at the surface of the particle, which are these negatively charged ones here. And then the Stern plane falls through the center of the counter ion. Oh, if you ask, sorry, okay, let me see what the question is. Oh, I repeat the diagram. Okay, let me redo it. Yeah. So just to a recap of the diagram to help explain what is adsorption and its relevance. Yeah. So we've understood. Okay, so let me just restart it side by side. So now remember we have our therapeutic agents. This is our therapeutic agent. Let me just make it bigger. Okay, so we have the blue. Okay, this is our therapeutic agent that has been dispersed. That's the solid particle that you see being dispersed in the suspension. So we're just picking one out and zooming in on it so that we can understand what we're talking about. And then, so here, the first limit is cations are adsorbed into the surface of the particle, leaving the anions and the remaining cations in solution. So when the cations see this particle, they adsorb into its surface. Let's make our cations orange. Yeah. So they just come and then they just quietly adhere onto, remember adhesive forces are between different molecules of different substances. Yeah. So they come and then they form a nice layer, a boundary here around your particle. And then by forming a layer onto the surface of the particle, it generates a potential, and this potential we refer to it as the Nernst potential. And since these cations are the ones responsible for the Nernst potential, they are referred to as potential determining cations. Excuse me. Yeah, so I think we've understood up to that part. So we know like repels like. So because we have formed a nice little boundary around the particle, there's no more room for any other, more positive ions to adhere onto its surface. It's completely full. So remember, we know like repels like. So you cannot have any other positive ions coming and adhering onto the surface because the positive charge will repel this positive charge here will repel this positive charge. So then they'll be pushed back. So it's impossible to form a second layer of positively charged particles. However, remember, unlike charges tend to attract each other. So we shall have the negative, the remaining anions, Jesus, sorry. Yeah, so now we shall have these remaining anions, leaving these anions here. They will now be attracted to the positive charge that has been created. Sorry, just excuse me for a minute. Yeah, so these positive charge will now attract the anions that are present in the solution. So now we shall have this negative layer. Yes. So now that will be what the individual particles of the suspension will look like. So the anions are electrostatically attracted to the positive surface of the particle, which we have seen to have demonstrated here. The presence of these anions will repel the approach of any further anions. So we cannot form any other layer of anions because the like charges of whatever will repel it away. So this is referred to as the double layer. Why is it canceling out? Yeah. So now it forms an what we call the electric double layer because it's electrically charged. Yes, we're seeing the positive and the negative, and there are two layers. The first one absorbed directly onto the particle. The second one has just been attracted by the positive charge, yeah, on the surface. So now we refer to this double layer as the stand plate. It's now your stand plate. And then they're giving you a quick review of what this stand plate comprises of. It comprises of the adsorbed ions on the surface of the particle, which is here in orange. And then it comprises of the adsorbed counter ions at the surface of the particle, which is this in green, yeah. And then the stand plane falls through the center of the counter ion layer. Yeah. So normally the charge at the surface of the particle is greater than that of the stand layer. That's like, I feel like that's basically it as it is. Divya, have you understood?
Yeah.
Okay. So are there any further questions before I carry on?
No.
No? Okay, so if you've understood, I can then carry on from that point on. No, okay. So let me carry on. So now so the stand plane is between the positive and the negative. Okay, okay. So A, from the question that you've asked, is the stand layer so according to this, the stand layer falls through the center of the counter ion layer. So this counter ion layer, it's through its center. I'm not sure how to demonstrate that. I'm not sure about that part really. I can't say. It doesn't seem to, the stand plane seems to be right through the negative charge, not between the positive and the negative, but just right through this positive charge, like just right through there. From what I've gathered. I don't know how to demonstrate that, but that's what I've understood. Okay, so let me see. The boundary of the second layer will possess a potential referred to as the zeta potential. Yes. So now we've seen the enhanced potential, which is the The first one, which is caused by the adsorption of the cations onto the surface of the particle. And then now we've introduced to a new concept known as the zeta potential, which is the potential that is generated as a result of the second layer, which is the negatively charged layer on the surface. Is there another question? Okay. Yeah. So these two, then the Nernst potential and the zeta potential, do play a role in pharmaceutical preparation, like the stability. They're usually used a lot in explaining things like stability, and the different kinds of suspensions, because as we're going to later discover, there are two types of suspensions. There's the flocculated suspension and there's the deflocculated suspension. Okay, I fail to understand what this graph means as a whole, so I can't really explain it. Let's see. I don't really understand it, so I can't explain what this is, but apparently it's supposed to represent what we've talked about, but I couldn't understand it, so I just drew my own mental image of what was going on. Yeah. So the relationship between the distance of separation and the interaction between particles, that's the second part. We finished talking about the presence of electrical charge on the suspension, and then it's the second one. So there are three possible scenarios of what could happen. So the first scenario is, which would be ideal, if you will, is the no interaction between particles, in which particles are maintained sufficiently distant from each other. They don't attract each other, they don't repel each other, just everyone is existing in this solution. And then there is no sedimentation, and the mixture is just thermodynamically stable, like no heat or no change in temperature will affect the solution. It's like everyone is living in utopia. This would be ideal, but then it's not really commonly seen. And then now we have the second scenario. So in the second scenario, there's coagulation or agglomeration, in which the particles form contact with one another. So it results in formation of a suspension that is pharmaceutically unacceptable, because like the caking that I talked about, because with time they come and they clamp together, and when they clamp together, they as a result of gravity, they keep on sinking at the bottom, they clamp together. The larger particles sink fast, and then as the smaller particles sink at the bottom as well, they like fit themselves into any of the spaces that were created by the larger particles, that were left behind by the larger particles, and then they form this dense packed cake. So it's difficult to redisperse, like this, the inability to redisperse upon shaking. So this is what we don't want to do. That's why they require a lot of like skills and a formulation of suspensions to prevent this caking phenomenon. And then there's the third one, which are loose aggregation or floccules. Now this is where the flocculated and deflocculated come in. So the loose aggregates or floccules, in which there is loose reversible interaction between the particles, so it enables the particles to easily redisperse on shaking. So this is mostly seen in flocculated suspension. It's the one where we shall find the floccules, and then they're easily redispersed. They tend to sink, and they tend to sediment faster. But then the minute you shake them, they will also easily redisperse, which makes them good. But then the coagulation, yes, this coagulation or agglomeration phenomenon is mostly seen in the deflocculated ones. Yeah. So yeah. So now I just keep this in mind as we proceed. Yeah. Yeah. So the sedimentation of controlled flocculation, yeah, this is what I was talking about, how we result in forming. So thermodynamically, it could be considered to be stable. However, particles in a suspension can sediment under the influence of gravity and settle at the bottom of the container. So the large particles reach faster, smaller particles occupy the space between the large particles, and then because they keep on sitting on top of each other, they form, there's this overall weight. The particles at the top will, because of gravity, they will carry this weight that will gradually compress the weight of those above, of those below. So in so doing, sorry, excuse me. Yeah, so they keep on settling at the bottom. The smaller particles occupy the space between them. Then the weight of these particles as they settle will keep on weighing on each other, and then they will lack sufficient energy to overcome the primary maximum. The primary maximum is also like another name for repulsive forces. So they'll not be able to repel each other, and then the weight of the particles will overcome their ability to repel one another. So since it will overcome them, the ability will closely form together, and then they will result in the caking phenomenon like we talked about. So this is mostly seen so this is mostly seen in the deflocculated suspensions. Yeah, this table gives like a brief overview of differences between the flocculated suspension and deflocculated suspension. So flocculated, they exist as floccules or loose aggregates. They sediment very fast, and they consist of loosely packed particles which can easily redisperse. Yeah, and then they are more, because they form these loose floccules or particles, they tend to have an elegant appearance. So whenever you're making a suspension, you should strive to see to it that it's more like it has more floccules, or it's leaning towards the flocculated suspension as opposed to the deflocculated. The advantage of the deflocculated is that it sediments slowly. So the particles exist as separate entities. The rate of sedimentation is low, so they form sediment slowly. So meaning once you shake, it will take a long time for the particles to settle at the bottom. So it ensures like this uniform, yes, uniform administration of hazardous form, meaning that that uniformly mixed throughout the solution. And then since they don't sediment very fast, you can go and pick like your measuring cup or your syringe, whatever it is you're using to measure, and you still find that they're uniformly dispersed. However, once you let them settle for like long periods of time, either like storage, before maybe they're being transported and that's in storage, if they form a cake, it's very difficult to redisperse. So now that's like the disadvantage. If they cannot redisperse, meaning all your therapeutic agent is at the bottom and you cannot administer it to the patient. And then they tend to have an unsightly appearance because of the way they cake at the bottom. So it will give doubt to your preparation. Like patients may not be so sure if it was well made or if it's still good quality or whatever. Yeah. Yeah. So back to our notes here. When you're performing a controlled flocculation, you must remember that if the reduction in zeta potential, remember that zeta potential is the potential that is created by the anions, the outer layer, the second layer of the double layer, the one that is outside that has been attracted by the positive charge on top of the therapeutic agent. Yeah, that is the zeta potential. Just quick recap. Yeah. So if you have a low zeta potential, then there is low likelihood of your particles repelling each other. And then if they do not repel each other, then the way then when they start settling down at the bottom, because they don't repel each other that much, they'll easily coagulate, from irreversible coagulation of the particles. Yeah. So low zeta potential can be used to kind of gauge whether or not your solution will either be flocculated or deflocculated. So I made a small summary here. So low zeta potential results in low repulsion, and if they do not repel each other, there's increased likelihood of caking. So a higher zeta potential would be preferred to prevent caking from taking place, essentially. So the other criteria that can be used to assess the sedimentation of drugs. So another one is the sedimentation volume. So it's the ratio of the VS, which is initial volume of the sediment, to the initial volume of the suspension. So I think it's, no, not this picture, sorry. Yes, yeah. So yeah. So now initially after you shake your, I think we did this practical one time. We did. So you first shake your suspension as it is. And then this is the flocculated and deflocculated. So because this one takes a much longer time to sediment at the bottom, it will form like a thin layer and then you'll still see particles redispersed. So you get the VS, this is the volume of the sediment, or let me use the flocculated because it's easier to see. This is the volume of the sediment here in the yellow. And then you divide it by the volume of your entire suspension as a whole before sedimentation took place. Yeah. Then that's how you calculate the sedimentation volume of a suspension. Yeah, so this volume may vary from a range less than 1 to values greater than 1. So 1 is like your it's like your marker, if you will, yeah. So if it's a deflocculated suspension, this volume is low, meaning it should be less than 1. And then if it's significantly less than 1, then you know your suspension is a deflocculated suspension. Whereas if your value of F is higher than 1, it's either really close to 1 or 1 itself or higher than 1 by any chance, then it's a flocculated suspension. So just like a quick recap, any number significantly less than 1 then it means it's deflocculated. The spelling is wrong, but the point has gotten across. And then if it's either close to 1, if it's close to 1 or greater than 1, greater than 1, then it's flocculated. Yeah. And then the third one and the final one is the degree of flocculation could also be defined as the ratio, the ultimate sedimentation volume of the flocculated suspension to the ultimate sedimentation volume of the deflocculated suspension. Yeah. And these are the main points of the measurement or the calculations that could arise from suspensions as a whole. But just if you've forgotten anything, just know low zeta potential. Let's go back to the zeta potential. Yeah. It would be good to summarize that one at least before we go, just to, if there's anything that you must remember. Remember our particle. This is our particle. This is this is the positive charge adsorbed on it that has adhered to it. And then remember the positive charge attracts a negative. Yeah. And then remember this positive charge is the one which is responsible for the shear plane, or the nernst potential. Sorry. This one's the one which is positive charge, which is the first one that adhered onto the particle, is responsible for the nernst potential. And then remember this negative charge here is the one that is responsible for the zeta potential. Sorry. Yeah. So Nernst potential is the first layer. The outer layer is the zeta potential. So if there's low zeta potential, meaning the strength of the negative charge is low. So meaning if they're not that strong, they will not strongly repel each other, as opposed to if it's like a strong negative charge, they would be pushing each other away. So if the zeta potential is low, meaning there's low likelihood of these particles repelling each other. So since they don't easily repel or push each other away, they then, like if you learn that, then the reverse is potential is high, means there is high repulsion in that we discussed. Because the forces will push each other away and then they will redisperse. So I'm not sure where I broke off from, but just to recap again, this potential is a result of this negative charge, and if the zeta potential is low, there's low repulsion. If there's low repulsion, then it will be easier for these particles, as a result of gravity, the weight of these particles, to overcome the repulsion forces, and therefore it will easily form a cake. However, now that if you learn then like the weight of the particles will not have sufficient energy to overcome the repulsion forces, and therefore it will be easily redispersed. So that is a more flocculated system. Yes. So and just use this for reference just to yeah. And then the sedimentation volume, I think I've finished discussing that, as well as the degree relation. Yeah. Then the physical properties of any therapeutic agent that uh, is going to be used in a suspension. So there are factors that we need to take into consideration. One, particle. So, however, in minimizing of the particle size could be like a double-edged sword of sorts, because there is increased risk of crystal growth or post-wild ripening. And the reason is because remember I think we've mentioned this, the smaller the particle size, the easier it is to dissolve it in any solution. That's why when we have a tablet, we take for things like disintegration, because we need it to disintegrate or break down into smaller particles so that it can easily dissolve into the GIT and then can now easily be absorbed. Yeah. So if the particles are small, they have increased solubility, increase in temperature. The minute there's a slight increase, yeah, is it? Slight increase in the storage temperature. It results in these smaller particles that have dissolved. So This therefore increases the average diameter of the suspended drug particles. Yeah. So we do not wish for there to be like crystallization. We have like uneven sizes of these random crystals just in your suspension. We include hydrophilic polymers. Hydrophilic specific Yeah, sorry, I think I broke off again. Yeah, so we try to prevent crystallization from happening by dissolving hydrophilic polymer, and it's specifically hydrophilic. Oh, it's unstable, Jesus. So it's specific to dissolve in the water because water is the vehicle for your suspension. So this was then okay. Sorry, I think my internet connection is unstable. Yeah. So I'll start again with let me just start the whole particle size bit again because I'm not sure where I lost you or where I lost myself. Anyway, so particle size plays a big role in the as a big role in the formation of the suspension, yeah. Because remember that law of the smaller the particles, the easier it is for them to dissolve in any solution that you put them in, yeah. So in order to have the good stability or physical stability and chemical stability of your particle, of your suspension, you need to optimize the size of the therapeutic agent. So in certain suspensions, crystal growth or Ostwald ripening, it's the same thing, just different names, could occur. And this happens in that when you have particles of different sizes, the larger ones will not be able to dissolve in your solution. However, the smaller ones will be able to dissolve in the solution, and when they will dissolve and kind of remain in a dissolved state. And then if there is any slight increase, as mentioned here, if there's any change in temperature, meaning even if there's a slight increase in storage temperature, then the dissolved particles will now form crystals on the larger particles that had not dissolved. Yeah. So this will result in crystallization on the dissolved drug, and then it will increase the average diameter of the suspended particles. So at the end of the day, you have a suspension that one isn't aesthetically pleasing, two, it just looks suspicious to the patient because it's not aesthetic. So you may be inclined to like throw it away or just never buy that product again. And three, because you have, yeah, it just basically uniformity of a dosage form because you have random bits of crystal particles just suspended within your solution as opposed to just being the therapeutic agent particles as they should be. So in order to prevent the formation of these crystals, we include hydrophilic polymers within the formulation. They have to be strictly hydrophilic because the vehicle that we're using is purified water, so they need to be able to dissolve in the water which is your vehicle. And then when they finally dissolve, they now adsorb on the suspended drug particles and offer a protective effect. So if they formed a layer around it, these particles now can no longer just dissolve at will, or even if there are some smaller ones that manage to dissolve, they are unable to now grow on top of these other particles that didn't dissolve, because there's this protective barrier that prevents them from doing so. So now this increases. So addition of these hydrophilic polymers is what helps to increase the stability of your suspension. Wetting properties. Okay, we've done these wetting properties, contact angle, we've done that in rheology. So I will not repeat that. Yeah, we mentioned that, yeah, water for oral administration, it's purified water, USP. And then that's the vehicle. And then you can add buffers in order to maintain a standard pH, because some therapeutic agents are only can only be soluble at a particular pH. So once we've set that pH, we try to prevent any change in pH, and that is by addition of buffers, and the common ones are the citrates, like citric acid or sodium citrate, which is the most common buffer for oral formulations. Yeah. And we've also studied about surface active agents. We don't need to repeat that. Okay. Yeah, just about addition of polymers so that we prevent crystallization from taking place. There are different polymers that you can add if it would either be ionic or non-ionic. Yeah, then rheological properties, that is like the thickness, or yeah, the apparent viscosity, or that is the thickness of the whatever the dosage form. Yeah. Okay, so yeah, so just viscosity enhancing agents, mostly the cellulose-based ones like methyl cellulose, hydroxy, ethyl cellulose, or it could be acacia gum, tragacanth gum, and xanthan gums. These are the most common polymers, or that these are mostly referred to as the natural polysaccharide-based polymers. If you ever come across a question like natural ones are the gums that we get from plants that we studied in carbohydrates. Yes. Preservatives, I talked about those ones. Shortening and oxy, yes, I mentioned this in my introduction. Yes, the sulfites. Okay, let me see, the last one was chapter 9. Yes, so I would like to quickly take you through tablets, because it was mentioned as one of the key areas. So we know tablets are a solid dosage form, yeah, and they are the most common dosage form that you can find on the market, nearly for every drug. So yeah, so there are different kinds or examples of tablets. Examples of tablets, which are this is a conventional compressed tablets. There's multiple. I'll just take you through them one by one as I mention what they are about. So the conventional compressed tablets are tablets that we normally see, and I think we've taken through the tableting system. So they just compress the tablets, or either you compress the powders, or in most cases use granules, and then you compress the granules to form a tablet. It's just the basic method. What's something called the dye, just tablet, but it's just the basic way that like things like paracetamol, ibuprofen. Those are compressed conventional tablets. But now the ones that can be like a little bit unique, or that we could take extra care to pay attention to, are the multiple compressed tablets. Yeah. So you could in these ones, there is multiple, like how you say multiple compressed tablets, so there are multiple layers. So there should be at least 2 layers for each to qualify as a multiple compressed tablets. The other one is just the conventional, is just a singular layer. The granules are pushed in the dye, the punch comes down, brushes them together, they're compressed, yeah? And then they're released from the dye, eventually pushed up and moved on to that is one layer. So for multiple, it has to be at least 2 layers. Then the first layer is formed by light compression of a drug containing powder or granules. So granules containing the drug are then lightly compressed. That's the first layer. And then this is the first layer. And then now we add an extra layer. Then we add the next layer, which is compressed, which is also contains a drug of a different drug, and then it's compressed on it like this. Yeah. So now it forms now 2 layers of a drug. Like it's one, at the end of the day, it's one tablet. It just comprises of 2 different layers. And there's so many reasons as to why tablets could be formed in such a way. So it helps in separation of drugs. You want to give it as one, like a tablet containing multiple drugs, like maybe it contains caffeine, contains paracetamol, it contains phenylephrine. Maybe you want to give a cold medication, phenylephrine or dexamethasone. It has all these different things. Then you put them in separate layers, because if you had put them together, they would have been incompatible, but you want to administer it in form of one tablet. Yeah. So this is one of the applications of these multiple drugs. If the drugs that you're putting together are incompatible when they're mixed together in a single layer, you put them in multi-layers. Yeah. And the second one can be used to deliver drugs or at different rates. Yeah. So you can have a drug which is slow releasing. So you don't have to administer as frequently. You can just administer once a day, and then the drug will be slowly released throughout the day. So you don't need to administer multiple times. And then this one, which is really common, is different sites within the GIT for a single tablet. Yeah. So these are mostly seen in the enteric coated tablets. Then another layer where there's multiple compressed tablets is coating. It can also be classified within these multiple layered tablets. So we're going to first, as a subcategory, we're going to start with the enteric coated ones. So enteric coated tablets are specifically designed to release the therapeutic agent only after they've reached the small intestines. Yeah. So they make it so that the coat that they've put around this coat is, it cannot be dissolved in the acidic conditions which are present in the stomach. However, since the small intestines are more alkaline in nature, they are suited to dissolve quite easily in alkaline conditions of the small intestines. So essentially, that tablet will pass by nearly chemically unchanged. When it passes the stomach, it will just pass through, and then it reaches the intestines. It will dissolve. Due to the alkaline conditions, the coat will dissolve, and then it will release the therapeutic agent that you want. So there are a few reasons why you would give enteric coated tablets. Number one, you want to protect against drug degradation in the stomach, because there's fast metabolism as a result of the stomach acid. So you're protecting it against degradation. And examples of drugs which we want to protect against degradation include erythromycin, or the drugs that you're administering are very irritant to the stomach mucosa. So in order to avoid this irritation, you coat them so that they pass unchanged without being exposed to the stomach walls unchanged, and then they're released in the intestines where they will not have this irritant effect. And examples of these are NSAIDs. So an example you can think of, like paracetamol, yes, ibuprofen. Those are all non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs. Yeah. So the examples of polymers that are used for to produce enteric coated tablets, there's the cellulose, there are 2 cellulose-based ones, and the first example is the cellulose acetate phthalate or cellulose acetate butyrate. Like this is one thing, like you can either use one or the other interchangeably. Yeah. And the second one is hydroxypropyl methyl cellulose succinate. And the third one is the butyrate, okay, methacrylic acid copolymers, mostly under this umbrella term, butyrate. Yeah. So just here they're giving a dissolution of this polymer, the phthalate stroke butyrate, the cellulose acetate Butyrate is it dissolves in pH greater than 6. Yeah, then the sugar, then now the coating. This is another example of the multi-layered tablets. So you can either have sugar coating or film coating. So sugar coating was mostly done before, but it's phasing out in preference for the film coated ones. Yeah. So the sugar coated tablets, they were coated in sugar, in concentrated sugar solution, as a means of improving the appearance of the formulation and also masking any bitter or unpleasant taste of the actual therapeutic agent. However, these sugar coatings have been like decreased in preference of the film coated tablets. Yeah. This is because the film coated tablets have much better improved mechanical properties. And two, you would want to avoid sugar coated tablets when you're administering diabetic medication. Yeah. So film coated ones were like an improved version of tablet coating. Yeah. So these film coatings, since they have yeah, the improved mechanical properties, as I mentioned before, they were kind of adopted more recently, like in current production, they're used more often than the sugar coated tablets. So it could either be the same polymers that we mentioned for enteric coated tablets, these three, or these other that are specifically used for this purpose, which are the ethyl cellulose and Udragid RS and RL, so which is different from this one, from the E100. Should not have that. Yeah. Yeah, so basically that's it. And then the other type of tablets that are noted or interest are the effervescent tablets. So what happens to these tablets is you get the tablet, you add it to water, and then it basically just disintegrates on its own and dissolves and produces these bubbles. Huh? So the reason why they able to different from other tablets is because as they're being manufactured, they have two main components, which is an organic acid, which is most common like citric acid, and then sodium bicarbonate. Yeah. So this sodium bicarbonate is one which is responsible for the effervescence that you see, because when it reacts with organic acid in the presence of water, there's evolution of the carbon dioxide gas, which is the bubbles that you see. So the main advantage of these tablets is that they're much more rapidly absorbed than the conventional tablets. And this is because you have skipped that whole step of when you swallow the tablet, you have to wait for it to be disintegrated. And this is like through movement of the intestinal walls, and then you have to wait for it to be disintegrated. And after it has been broken down and disintegrated, it has to now dissolve and then eventually be absorbed. But then here you've kind of cut out the middleman. So it has already been dissolved. All you have to do is just waiting for absorption. So they work much faster, if you will. So that's the main advantage. Then the main disadvantage of this dosage form is that there are two main disadvantages. Number one is if you give this type of medication to a patient who doesn't have access to water, then they're unable to use it. They cannot just swallow it as it is. That's number one. And the second reason is you have to have specific packaging that is waterproof or will keep the tablet to have the lowest moisture content as you possibly can, because the minute it's exposed to water or to any moisture, then the reaction between the sodium bicarbonate and organic acid will happen, and then um, the tablet will lose its integrity. Yeah. So buccal or sublingual tablets, I think like the most common um, example is the nitric acid one. I don't usually give when people have an angina or whatever. So you just put it usually below, between your cheek and the gingiva. Gingiva is like the jaw. Yes. And then sublingual tablets are positioned underneath the tongue. Then buccal tablets are positioned between the cheek and the gingiva. Like that's the difference. So just basically you leave them there and then they will slowly dissolve on their own with time and then they'll go into systemic circulation. Like that's how you don't swallow or you don't put them in water. That's how they're administered. Yeah. So in cases where you're unable to, when people have like nausea or vomiting and you're unable to directly give them one oral drug for to like swallow, you can give them sublingual tablets as an alternative. Yeah. And then by administering it in this case, it helps to avoid fast pass metabolism, which is an advantage in this case. Yeah, so main advantages of tablets as a dosage form, sorry. They're convenient and easy to use, so you can just put them in your bag. Just carry, if you need one tablet during lunchtime, you just carry that one tablet and take it with you, as opposed to carrying a whole. As opposed to if you're carrying like a syrup, you have to carry the whole bottle as a whole. Yeah. So there's the aspect of convenience, which by adding that convenience, it also increases the compliance of the patient to take their medication. And then because there are different ways in which they can be made. They can be either made as buccal tablets, sublingual, effervescent, enteric coated tablets, or whatever. It means that you can control, you can control the drug release, yeah. And then it can help to, by controlling drug release, you can reduce the number of daily doses required. And then it also, then there, and so doing increases the patient compliance in order to take the drug, yeah. And then they may be formulated to release therapeutic agent in a particular site, which is the enteric-coated tablets that we mentioned before. So if you have an NSAID and someone already has like ulcers or their mucosal lining is already, their stomach lining is already irritated, administering an enteric-coated tablet will kind of ensure that it's released in the intestine, so it prevents further irritation. Yeah. So tablets they can contain more than one therapeutic agent. So instead of giving a patient so many different tablets that contain an individual drug, can give them one tablet that has all these therapeutic agents that you wish to administer. So it's much easier, it's convenient. Again, compliance comes in. And then nearly all classes of therapeutic agents can be administered orally in the form of tablets. This is with an exception of proteins. Yeah. And then it's easier to mask the bitter taste of drugs using either film coats or sugar coats. Yeah. And then tablets they're inexpensive generally. So if they're inexpensive to make, meaning they'll be inexpensive to sell when you're selling now to the end consumer, which increases their affordability. And then it's easier to show product identification, yeah, because you can mark the surface of the tablet. So if you have a punch that is marked, you can have it embossed or engraved, like how there's paracetamol, which usually has like a P on it, or it has that dotted line, so that in case you have to divide to have the normal dosage form, it's like this. It has a demarcated line where you can divide it. So again, these unique markers make it so that you don't confuse just any normal white tablet that you see there to be paracetamol, because you know paracetamol has unique markings that are unique to it, yeah, as opposed to other dosage forms. So they have and the chemical, physical, and microbial stability of tablet dosage forms is superior to other dosage forms, as we've seen, like the syrups, the suspensions. This one has the high stability, so overall, so it will be a better dosage form to make or to administer. Then the disadvantage is the absorption of, yeah, the normal disadvantage is if you cannot give it to certain groups of patients, especially if the tablets are larger in size, like children, that's the pediatrics, and the geriatrics, which are the elderly. So, or if someone is suffering from nausea and vomiting, they'll not be able to orally take the tablets. So this process of elimination, and then if there's if you don't optimize like different unit processes that are involved in the manufacture of tablets, such as the compression of these therapeutic agents, it will now result in problems in the formulation and manufacture. And then the absorption of therapeutic agents is also dependent on other physiological factors, such as the gastric emptying rate. And so since these things like gastric rate and other physiological factors may be different from one patient to the next, you cannot really get a clear picture of maybe the pharmacokinetics or the pharmacokinetic properties of the drug when it's now within the system. Yeah. Then, oh yeah, because tablets require the series of unit processes, the compression, the granulation, there's the wet granulation, dry granulation, all these small processes that take into, if you are to do wet granulation, you have to prepare either the paste or the granulating fluid that is now going to be used. Like there's so many different steps and processes that take place that if you mess up on one step, it could easily have a domino effect on all the others. So there's you have to be extra careful at each stage of production and just take much more care than you would in any other dosage forms. I think we've covered this in the manufacture of tablets, dry granulation, compression, and what has been covered in the unit processes. So that's all I had for you in terms of pharmaceutics and dosage forms. Yeah, the others I think you can read for yourself. So are there any questions? Okay, if there are no questions, then I'll assume you've understood. Thank you for those who have been able to make it to the discussion. Oh, there's a question. Yeah. Thank you all for coming. Those who have made it this far into the discussion. Yeah. Have a nice evening. I don't know if there's anyone else who's going to present.